Welcome to Understanding Standard Operating Procedures and Sanitizers. My name is Ivan Blumenthal. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of ARC Consult. On the top left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there's a banner for a Facebook page that's called That COVID-19 Oversight Guy. I would encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, to go onto Facebook and simply like that page, that COVID-19 Oversight Guy. What we are trying to do here is we are trying to collect all of the questions, all of the complaints as well, by the way, of everything to do with the implementation of the back to work strategy of the Department of Employment and Labor and other government departments, including the Department of Health. It's critically important that within our community, we have sight, if you want, of all of the goings on, and particularly the exigencies. I hate at this early stage talking about exigencies, but we believe that there are going to be quite a few armies of bureaucrats out there who are very eager, and I'm quoting now the Department of Employment and Labor's minister and his Politburo, who were on television last night telling you that they are going to enjoy closing down your businesses if a whole lot of things are not in place. So the purpose of this webinar today is to talk about what some of those things should be in terms of standard operating procedures, to introduce you to companies and people who are playing in that space in terms of making things happen for businesses generally, and there are lots of them, and more importantly, to talk about some of the equipment for the larger areas, but also even for the small retail spaces that could make sense in terms of the sanitization requirements of those standard operating procedures. But again, please go to That COVID-19 Oversight Guy. That's a Facebook page, That COVID-19 Oversight Guy, and just like that page. One of the things I am going to ask you, please, ladies and gentlemen, to do is whoever walks into your workplace, be it a young inspector from the Department of Employment and Labor who possibly has only now been appointed, and we know that they're saying they're going to be appointing a couple thousand more of these inspectors over the weeks to come, but be it a young inspector who forces his way into your workplace, be it a member of the South African Police Services, a member of the South African Defence Force, be it a health inspector from your local municipality, whoever forces their way into your workplace, what I'm going to implore you to do is to please either an audio recording of your interaction with the individual, or preferably a video recording of your interaction with that individual, so that we are then able to follow up and pursue in terms of what's being told to you, in terms of the excesses, and I call them exigencies, of what might be being told to you, and importantly, along the way, to figure out what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I'm going to ask you, and I know that the South African inclination, unfortunately, is to try and bribe officials. Let's call it pay commissions to officials. I'm going to ask you please to try and avoid doing that, because even though it might be a short-term solution for you, it's definitely not a long-term solution. And we will be back where we were for many, many decades in South Africa, that every time your car gets stopped, you pull out a 100 Rand note or a 200 or a 500 Rand note, and you're on your way again. We cannot afford that kind of culture here when it comes to COVID-19, because all it then does is perpetuate that technocratic culture, that Politburo culture, that Gestapo kind of culture that we do not want to see from our government civil servants. And I need to emphasize again, these are civil servants. They're employed by the public on behalf of the public. They are not there to dictate to the public. We are on the edge of this thing happening, 9, 10, 11. We're literally 3 hours into the day. And so we need to be aware of the precedents that we're setting from now for the last 3 hours and onwards. We need to be aware of the precedents that we're setting. So these are some of the questions we're going to be dealing with today. But the assumption is that you're either already open or that you will be opening this coming week. And you will know that by looking at the Government Gazette of the 29th of April. That is the last Government Gazette which was produced by Nkosazana Dlamini's COGTA division, Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs division, and it is her division and her ministry that is in charge of the state of disaster here in South Africa. Now, your businesses will be open for one of a variety of reasons. Either you are listed as an essential service offering essential products or essential services in the government gazette, or alternatively, you are listed on the schedule, the Department of Trade and Industry's schedule under COGTA as one of a variety of industries which under level 4 bar the exceptions to essential services from level 5, but under level 4 are permitted to be operating in South Africa. So I do need to bring to your attention that you need to be working with the 29th of April Gazette, and importantly, the changes to the schedule of the various industries. Some of those industries did change, and I was using as an example hardware, where on the original listing under 10 and 11 of E, hardware sales only to essential services of essential service products was changed to be reflected on the Government Gazette after the 29th of April, was changed to be reflected any hardware of any product, whether it's being sold to an essential service or to an individual in civil society. So that's just one particular change I want to bring to your attention. Another particular change I want to bring to your attention is in category E, the very last component of category E, number 20, which essentially says any internet business, any business for internet trading, which would then have a delivery courier service attached to it, would essentially be permitted in terms of that gazette. And that changes things dramatically. I'm using here as an example retail florists. Retail florists are not included in the list as a business which is entitled to open their doors within a shopping center, but a retail florist set up as an e-trading business with a delivery service would be perfectly permissible in terms of category E of the regulation of industries. So it's critically important as well, ladies and gentlemen, that you distinguish between the alert levels 1 to 5, knowing we've just come away from 5 and we are now officially into 4, but equally so that we have yet to hear from our various provinces, where the provinces might indicate that they either wish to remain on level 5, or some of those provinces might in fact decide that they want to be less than level 5, less than level 4, possibly even a 3. Some of them might even pretend to want to be a 2. So that jury is out, and you need to be aware of the fact that you could be hit at some stage with the realization that even though the national alert level is level 4, your alert level in your particular province or even in your particular city, and we were led to believe by the Minister of Cooperative Governance, Nkosazana Zuma, on Saturday, and I think also on Monday again, but we were led to believe by her that in fact we might even see the red hotspot cities such as Johannesburg, Cape Town and Durban being classified as level 5, whereas the province might remain at a level 4, in line with the national level 4 reading as well. So it is getting quite complicated for you to understand the terms under which you are setting up business, opening business, reopening business, and beginning to trade again. But you must always at the back of your mind, bear in mind, that the national level might be different to the provincial level and might in fact be different to your suburban or even your city level. And that will really only come out in the wash over the next couple of days and maybe the next couple of weeks. We know, for example, that the Premier of KZN has said he would like to see KZN as a level 5 province. And in fact, he's been taken to task on that by the Command Council, the COVID Command Council, as they call themselves, because of it being so outspoken. We know for a fact that he's closed the beachfront down in Durban because he doesn't want to see a Cape Town Sea Point kind of carnage that occurred the moment that the curfew was lifted for people walking and exercising from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning. So we know that those are problem points that will come out in the wash. We will be using the that COVID-19 Facebook page that I spoke to you about a little earlier, that COVID-19 oversight guy Facebook page, for the distribution of information as and when it comes out. Trevor has asked the question, how do we get access to new legislation? Well, Trevor, if you're on one of our WhatsApp groups, the COVID or the small WhatsApp groups, or any of the WhatsApp groups, the SAPMA WhatsApp group, the Surface Coating Association WhatsApp group, then we copy as soon as gazettes come out, we copy and we try and run webinars on the basis of some of the gazettes that have come out. So, for example, one of the follow-up webinars we'll be running later in the week is how to apply the risk profile that you have to do, and you have to be able to show any inspector coming to your workplace. We'll talk about that in a webinar. It only came out this morning as a gazette, so we're unpacking it still, and we're looking to put it into a webinar. So, Trevor, the answer to you is we post the documents onto the WhatsApp groups. We will also be posting the document onto the Facebook page. We will also be emailing you, if you're on our email list, we will also be emailing you with the various documents and as the gazettes come out. I think it's critically important. Our role is to keep you apprised of the law and the rules and the regulations as they are changing, and then our role as well from that COVID-19 oversight guy Facebook page is to keep on top of any exigencies, any abuse of power, and to deal with it as and when it occurs. Good. So thank you for that question, Trevor. So my first question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Do you understand the difference between being listed in the 29th of April Gazette versus the 30% maximum operating application? And I can add to that now also the internet trading application as it's contained in that guideline. My assumption is all of you do, but just for maybe one or two of you who've asked me to deal with this issue previously, I'm going to take the liberty of dealing with it. And that is, I'm going to say the following to you. If you are not listed in any of the categories of the Gazette, if you are not listed in any of the categories of the Gazette, as it appears from that 29th, as it appears from that 29th of April Gazette. And I just want to quickly pull that up on the screen so I can actually show it to you, just to give you some kind of a reference. But if you are listed on any of those categories of that Gazette, then in fact, what you are required to do, if you are not listed on any of the categories of that Gazette, is you're required to use one of a number of catch components, which in fact have been introduced into practice. The first of those catch components is in fact the one which is very interesting, and it has gone through it's morphed from one percentage to another percentage within a couple of days. And I'm going to just quickly go through that now with you. So it's this Gazette over here, and it's the from page 24 onwards, it's the alert level table. So if you're not listed in any part of A all the way through, and this, by the way, will be posted and on the various sites and also emailed to you. But if you're not listed from A to part Q, and there was originally only G, but as you can see, it's expanded dramatically. But if you're not listed from anywhere from A to part Q, there are two particular catchment areas that I want to bring your attention to. The first catchment area is category E20, which says directions may permit the incremental expansion of e-commerce, taking into account the need to limit the extent of movement on the road, contact between people, law enforcement challenges, and the impact of other businesses. Now, that's a catch-all category for those companies that are not allowed to physically open, but believe that they can trade from home, or you can go into your physical premises, lock the doors, and set up there. But as an e-commerce trading business, you're entitled to do that. And then, of course, the second The second area, which is a catchment area, is for those manufacturers under Part C, where under C9, all other manufacturing scaling up to 30% of employment and subject to strict health protocols. So those are the two primary catchment areas for those companies. Those are the two primary catchment areas for those companies which can't fit themselves into anywhere from A, which is agriculture, hunting, forestry, and fishing, all the way down to Q, which is education services. So if you can't fit yourself into any of those, and by the way, another general catchment area is Part M, which is the supply chain catchment, because there again, there's a great deal of flexibility in the application of the supply chain catchment. So I just quickly wanted to tell you that that's how you will know that you are going to end up then in this category over here. How you will know then that you end up being different from that A to Q listing, and you're falling into that 30% maximum operating application. And I do need to say this, I do need to stress this, ladies and gentlemen, that it talks about ramping up to 30%. The first Gazette that came out after the president's announcement, the first Gazette that was dealt with by Nkosazana Zuma and Patel, the Minister of Trade and Industry, was one which spoke about 20% in this category of manufacturing. It's been ramped up since then by the 29th of April from that 20% to 30%. But I use that term ramped up because it refers specifically to the ramping up. And in talking about the ramping up, it means that there are 4 stages to getting to either 100% of your capacity or 30% of your capacity. So there are 4 stages to achieving either 100% of your capacity or, in fact, 30% of your capacity. And you need to understand and you need to know what that means. And that says the following. It says that the first stage, which should be from today, and let's do it in weeks. So the first stage should be from today until, let's say, Friday, which gives you time to have a skeleton team of people who are going into the workplace, cleaning the workplace, putting in place your standard operating procedures, putting in place all of the sanitization mechanisms, all of the mask mechanisms, putting up on your wall all of the posters, all of the information, and publishing the plan to your employees, for the work that needs to be done as they return to the workplace. So it's envisaged that stage 1 is a preparatory phase of a skeleton group of your staff that are responsible for making sure that the moment your staff move back into the workplace, everything is ready, it's set for them, the machines are up and running, and social distancing, the most critical component of it, is something that you can adhere to. I spoke to an individual this morning who has 180 people in one particular plant, and he told me we are starting off with 40 people. We are then bringing back another 80 people, and then the last component of it will be brought back at the very last phase of the implementation of this 4-stage process. But the important thing is this: you need to know the components of your business. And in knowing the components of your business, you will either then determine that your business is able to be divided into 3 separate components that can be rolled out over a 4-stage process, or if your business really, each component of your business is intrinsic to the other, and you cannot separate out the functions of your business, the departments, the divisions of your business, then you need to be able to say that you can divide your staff into 3 groupings, roughly about 33.3% of the total number of your staff into 3 groupings, and you will bring them back in 3 stages. So your first stage is preparation of the workplace, where you've got to have your standard operating procedures, all your posters, your risk assessment in place, your plan which you've written out and you've distributed to all of your staff in place. Then the second stage is the first stage of bringing your employees back to work. The first 33.3% of your employees, or alternatively, dividing your divisions into 3 that you open up over a gradual 3-stage process populated by 100% of the staff in each of those divisions. It's really up to you. It is an art, not a science, and I know that's my favorite mantra, but it's an art, not a science, which means you can go either way. You're either going for 33% of your staff or you're going for 33% of the functions of your business. But in any event, it will have the net effect of gradually introducing a third of your staff back to work over a period of time. I've been asked, what should that period of time be? There is no regulation or legislation on that. It is a case of show us that you're able to bring the first third of your staff back into the workplace, that you're able to apply your standard operating procedures to them, that you're able to apply all of the social distancing and sanitizing requirements to them, that they're able to live with that they're able to come on a repeated number of days back to work where they show that they're following the SOP, they're being assessed against the SOP. And remember, please, that now legally you're required to have a compliance officer appointed in the company who will be accountable for your standard operating procedure, in fact, being applied. So please remember, you have to identify that person. You may have to make that person known to all of the staff. This is the go-to compliance person, be it a manager, be it a director, or in fact, even be it a shop steward or a group of shop stewards. You can have more than one person who's responsible for compliance. You can have divisional compliance as well. This is the new bureaucracy of complying with the back to work procedure of the Department of Employment and Labor at this stage, although we do anticipate the Department of Health will come out with their own provisions pretty soon as well. And I know that Kobus and Nadira, my guests, will in fact be commenting on that as we get into the discussion. So your preparation phase is critically important, and then you bring the people back in 3 groups back into the working environment. I've been asked, what if we only employ 20 people? Well, then logic prevails, ladies and gentlemen. If you only employ 20 people, bring them back in groups of 6 or bring them back in groups of 7 and one in groups of 6, showing that the first, or rather the second stage, but the first stage of bringing your employees back is one where you're testing out the machinery of what you've implemented. Your standard operating protocols and procedures, the social distancing, your sanitizing mechanisms. Give it a couple of days of applying, and learning from the application. Try, in fact, video some of that so that you've got evidence as well, should you ever be raided by a police person or by a defense force, a soldier with an AK-47, or alternatively, should you be raided by one of the Politburo's Gestapo inspectors from the Department of Employment and Labor that the minister and his technocrats told us last night will be released into the workplace, primarily to find errant businesses that they can close down. That's not me, by the way. That's me quoting the directors and the deputy directors and divisional heads who work under the Minister of Employment and Labor. If any of you saw that broadcast, I take it you will have been as visibly upset and terrified, quite frankly, as I was by what is supposed to be a peaceful process to the benefit of civil society. But nevertheless, that's what we're faced with, and that's what we have to be adapting to, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so before I introduce my guests, and they are Nadira Haripersad of Maya Architects and Kobus van Zyl of NMS Africa. Before I introduce my guests, can I ask you, are there any questions? Anyone want to make any statements on the basis of anything I've said so far about understanding that if you're not in the Gazette, then you could be in one of the catchment categories of that Gazette? And number 2, the 4-stage process, because I have received a number of questions, and it's for that reason that I've started this webinar discussing those particular questions. Anybody want to raise any issue, please feel free to type your question in to the chat facility if you don't want to, but I'm going to give it just a minute to see if anyone wants to come online and ask any question in that regard. So there are a couple of questions here. Ian says, please, can you share the WhatsApp group invite link, please? Of course we can, Ian. We'll send that out with the emails. Ivan says, does this mean any kind of product can be delivered under E20? Yes, Ivan, basically that's exactly what it means. If you have an online business, then what E20 means is, as an online business, and you have a courier service, or in fact you're using your own drivers or yourself to deliver on the basis of an online order, you are completely covered by E20. So let me emphasize, thanks for that question. I just want to emphasize a couple of things about what I just said. There is absolutely no regulation in South Africa which requires you to have to use a courier service to deliver product from your business to your customers and clients. There is nothing requiring you to use courier services, which under level 5 might have been classified as an essential service courier service for that purpose. So for example, if your staff are laid off, but some of them might have cars, might have motorbikes, etc., you are fully entitled to use them as couriers to deliver your product to customers and to clients. Presumably, I don't have to tell you that in doing that, they have to observe social distancing mechanisms. So if they're, for example, taking a bunch of flowers to a home in Sandringham, they will knock on the door or ring the bell. Someone will say, who's there? They'll say, it's Dolly's Flower Services, and they will walk away from the door, making sure that they're a minimum of, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 meters away from the door, while Doris comes to the door to fetch her flowers from Dolly's Flower Services. You've seen it on TV quite a bit if you've been watching the news channels. It's standard how these couriers should be operating, but there is no requirement, and I want to emphasize, there is absolutely no requirement that says you have to use established courier or delivery services. You do not, and in fact, it is encouraged for you to think about bringing some of your staff back, particularly for courier services, although you do need to be aware of the fact that the moment you do that, you invalidate your opportunity to claim TER on behalf of those employees. But that's a different discussion for a different day. Okay, so that's critically important. And I hope that answers that first point you raised, Ivan. Please advise the first catchment area again. Natalie, please advise the first catchment area again. The first catchment area is your preparation group of people, which means that it is the people who will come in to clean up your workplace, your HR people who will come in to put in place your standard operating procedures, put up the posters on the walls, make sure that you send out to all of your employees your plan for them returning to work. They have to see that plan before they come back to work. Critically important. It was emphasized by the Department of Employment and Labor, Gestapo, last night, that your employees have to see your plan before they come back to work so they know what they're getting into. And the implication is they then have to have the right to make a decision as to whether or not they want to stay at home and remain on temporary employment relief or alternatively come back to the workplace. You cannot force them to come back to the workplace in any one of your 3 groupings of employees. But you can certainly treat it as no work, no pay. It's not absence without leave. They're entitled to stay at home under lockdown and qualify for TER while your business is open. However, if they do stay at home, it's no work, no pay. I hope that's what you meant by catchment area, Natalie. Unless you were asking me to talk about the alert levels, levels 5 to level 1, and the fact that we are awaiting provincial declarations of alert levels and even city declarations of alert levels. If that's the case, then this webinar will be available to you to go back and to listen to the explanation. All right. Ivan says, courier says only essential items. Yes, so Ivan, what you've got to remember is that the only place that the couriers are classified as essential services is under the level 5 classification of level services that has been drawn into that schedule, that alert, industry alert schedule that I referred to a little earlier on the screen. Mandy says, please advise what category live-in building managers and cleaning staff for sectional title apartment buildings. They don't fall in there, but they are cleaning staff. So the fact that they're live-in is neither here nor there, but they are cleaning staff. You're entitled to have cleaning staff for sectional title buildings available. But the fact that they live in or live out, they're not domestic workers. So the fact that they live in or live out is immaterial here. How you prove e-commerce delivery. You prove e-commerce delivery by having an e-commerce order. Please send me a bunch of roses to this following address, and here is proof of my payment. And it's that goes along with the driver, so that if they're stopped by any of our very diplomatic police or soldiers out there, they can say, we're an e-commerce company. Here is our trading certificate as an e-commerce company, number one. Number two, here is our online site. You can check it. And here is our printed proof of the fact that we received an order, payment has been made, and we're delivering these roses to Doris. Okay, so moving on. Very last question. Where does higher education fit in with regard to returning to work? Natasha, it's the very last. It's Q on that schedule, number one. And what it implies is that anything to do with higher education has still to come down the line from the two ministries. That's Department of Education, Department of Higher Education and Training. It's not included in the Gazette. There were supplementary gazettes out by the ministers. We will make those gazettes available to you, and we might have a webinar specifically for training providers to understand where they fit into this particular zoo.